This is part 7 of my Outlander Blood of My Blood Season 1 Episode 3 review. As always, if you are looking to avoid spoilers from the books or the TV shows, please do keep on scrolling. So at the oath taking, after Alec pledges his fealty and loyalty to Colum and Dougal, we see McKimmie start to realize that it's over for him. And when he approaches them, he draws his dirk and he does actually point it up towards Colum. And I think for a moment he probably thinks about doing something irrational before he thinks better of it. I think he recognizes that the two of them combined and standing in tandem with one another is just too big a hurdle for him to overcome. And so eventually he does pledge his loyalty to them both and kneel before them. And Colum very wisely understands that if you have an enemy, you want to keep them very close. So he tells McKimmie that he will be one of their trusted advisors. It'll be interesting to see what they do with him moving forward with the show. And at the same time that this is happening, Jocasta and Janet are kind of making it known to Ellen that they realize she was involved in this. And she tells them it was Ned that made sure it was legal. And Janet gives Ellen her flowers. She knows that she's very smart and that she was the mastermind behind this. And Jocasta is almost angry about it. And again, every scene she's in, I can't figure out if everything's kind of bubbling under the surface and eventually she's going to explode on Ellen. But at one point, you can actually see her shaking her head, almost in disbelief that once again, Ellen saves the day. And once again, Ellen's the smartest person in the room. And she's clearly just jealous about it. Later on, Ned and Henry are meeting one another in a brothel. And Henry comes with Archbug. And we can see them discussing kind of the events of the day. And Ned reminds Henry that he thinks that this is a really good match. Henry does tell Ned that Isaac now sees the value in the alliance, especially because he knows just how determined Malcolm was and is to marry Ellen. And Ned says to him that Malcolm will not be disappointed, nor will Isaac, before just looking at his drink and starting to chug it. And I think, if you've read the books, we all know how the story goes. There's going to be a lot of disappointment. I found it kind of funny how Archbug at the first opportunity leaves the brothel and goes outside and has Henry stay inside to handle his business, and he'll wait for him outside. So Arch is not privy to what Henry is up to. It kind of affords Henry a little bit more privacy. And so the only person who really knows that he's looking for someone is Ned. Ned introduces Henry to this woman, Mrs. Hay, and she asks Henry to describe the woman that he is looking for so that she can help him. And when Henry starts to describe Julia as an English woman with fine features and soft brown hair, she's pale, but she has these piercing blue eyes, and they're kind. And when they look at her, they can make you feel like everything is right in the world. You can see his facial expressions start to soften the more he talks about and thinks about Julia. And then he tells her her name is Julia. I think for me personally, I fell in love with the way that Henry loved Julia in episode 2. And we really haven't had any opportunity where he's thinking of Julia. Like, a lot of what we've seen so far is Julia thinking of Henry. And we had that first letter that he sat down and wrote how he feels, but we haven't seen him doing anything about it. It's just been them both walking through the motions, thinking about each other, but neither of them are doing anything to change the circumstances. And we know that Julia really can't at this point. So this is the first time that Henry is actively doing something to find her. And it's nice to kind of have him put back in his modern day loving headspace, looking for his wife, because he's been playing this part of the Blager back in time working for the Grants, and it's just a very different version of him. Mrs. Hay says that a woman that he's describing like that shouldn't be hard to find, and she'll reach out to him when she has word of her, and it's going to cost him a lot of money. But Henry says to her, I'll pay whatever I have to in order to find her. Meanwhile, Julia is at Leather's. And this is when I think her resolve starts to crack. She's getting to the end of her rope mentally, and we see in a montage of clips like her slowly starting to unravel. and it's implied that she is writing another letter. So for Julia, these letters are almost the vehicle that the show is using to give her the same sort of internal monologue treatment that they gave Claire in Outlander. But it's under this guise of, we're only going to get it when she's writing a letter. We're not going to have her thoughts pop up randomly like they would with Claire's. Another, just an aside, is that this looks like a pen. I had someone in my comments point that out, and it does look like a pen, and it's bothered me ever since. It just doesn't look like a writing instrument of that era. But essentially this letter that she's writing is talking about how miserable she is and trying to hide her pregnancy while she's being watched so closely and is constantly in fear of being punished for doing something wrong. And she's in this prison, not only of this time that she's in and the country that she's in, but also because she does not know how she is ever going to escape this place. We see all these clips of her being observed and followed and watched by Lord Lovett's henchman here. You know, even while she's cleaning the privy, he is sitting not far away from her with eyes on her all the time, watching her constantly, and that would be enough to make anyone go crazy. All of these scenes remind me of when Claire was at Castle York and Rupert was following her around the whole time, and then you realize, like, I would much prefer Rupert following me around than this guy. And to top it all off, she's also constantly worrying about where Lord Lovett is and trying to avoid him as well. And we see her in this scene here cleaning this bedchamber, and he's standing in the doorway, and then shortly after, Davina walks into the scene and Simon realizes he can't do anything because Davina's there. But all of it is foreshadowing for the decision that she makes at the end of this episode. And we're kind of watching and listening to her in real time try and justify what she's about to do in her letter to Henry. She realizes that even though she was able to provide Henry with a lot of encouragement and motivation and, you know, comparing everything that he was going through to this metaphor of a raindrop, she is struggling to remain strong in herself. And she says she feels like she's drowning. She wants to give up, but the only thing that she is willing to live for is their unborn child. You know, the options that were laid out in front of her by Davina Porter earlier in the episode make it clear to her that, you know, even though she doesn't want to live herself, there is no option or scenario in which she would allow her child to be hurt or not live. And so the decisions she's going to make are prioritizing that end goal of their child living and the hope that one day she'll be able to reunite the child and Henry with her. And again, Claire. So as we see her finish writing this letter that she's been verbalizing, seal it with a kiss, and then burn it in her fire, she has this look of determination on her face before she walks downstairs. I'll be curious what happens with these letters moving forward because she's burned everyone that she's written so far. I don't know if she's going to take it up again or if they're kind of doing away with the letters. But we hear her asking Henry for forgiveness for what she's about to do because it's a decision she's making to try and protect her unborn baby. And it reminded me a lot of Claire in season 2. Hermione Corfield did give an interview that was released today talking about the decision making behind Julia going to Simon and how it's less about her survival and more about her babies. And it was her first day on set that she shot this scene. And Simon Fraser believes in prophecies and the Fraser prophecy specifically. So go and watch that video I did on the Fraser prophecy to get some context. But Julia is unknowingly involving herself in something much bigger than she realizes. Because if she's going to trick Simon into believing this child is his, he is going to believe this child is a part of the prophecy as well. And even though Brianna technically was the only person that fulfilled the 200-year-old baby prophecy, Julia's unborn child was conceived in the future and traveled 200 years in the past. And if it is born in the past, it would qualify as well. So this storyline could get very interesting, and I'll likely do a separate video fleshing this out in greater detail. But there's going to be major repercussions for this decision, and it broke my heart for Julia to watch her do this. But I can see where the show's going with it. Do I like it? No. But I think I can deal with it. It'll be interesting to see how they handle it in the next episode and subsequent episodes moving forward.